Great question. Can a child in his IEP during transition time, and that would be depending on the state, but in the federal, it can start as early as 14, ninth grade, right in there. But some states are different. Transition would start at 16 in some states. So you need to look at your regs to really clarify that and understand it. But transition is the additional services and supports that enter in as your child is starting to move toward exiting secondary education. So, meaning, what are they going to be doing for the rest of their lives? Whether that's tracking toward a university, whether that's tracking toward a trade school, whether that's supported employment. It is also the time when you have the introduction of what they call linkages to agencies that come in, meaning Alabama Vocational Rehabilitative Services. And I said Alabama because it's, but every state has a voc rehab, a vocational rehabilitative service department. In whatever variety or whatever name they call it, but that's typically the state's agency name. And they're responsible for coming in as members of the IEP team. Now, your IEP team needs to refer your child over to Voc Rehab and some of these other agencies that can fulfill these additional duties so that when your child exits at either 18 when they get a diploma, and I'm talking about a regular diploma. I'm not talking about an adjusted or an extended type of diploma. I'm talking about one where it's tracking toward a college as far as college credit type diploma. Because if they, let's say, have the child walk at 18, but they did not get a regular credits-based college tracking diploma, they would still be entitled to special education services until they're 21. Okay, so I wanted to add that little caveat in there because I've had too many clients, because you do have a statute of limitations to go back on the school for stuff like this, where they graduate students that don't have regular credits-based diplomas, and they should have been entitled to continue receiving services until they're 21. Okay, now with that being said, 18 or 21, sort of depending, it could be 19, could be 20, but any time prior to receiving that credits-based diploma, the child would be entitled to all these transition services. And like I said, the introduction of these outside agencies to help support, because there needs to be that handoff between these agencies and the public school, who's been providing the FAPE, from the time your child was identified as eligible. So that's very important to understand. Now, what kind of stuff, should they be putting into the IEP? It's got to be tangible, guys. It's got to be beneficial. It's got to be meaningful. And this whole thing to where they develop these IEPs and you have a year to where they're discussing what your child maybe want to do after, it doesn't take that long, guys. And so many parents do not understand the transition pages and the additional transition goals that fold in. And there are some school systems that they try to mesh the transition goals with the other educational performance area goals, as though this is now sufficient. The transition goals and the other ones just sort of blend together and that's it. We're going to throw our hands up. That isn't necessarily the case. It depends on the nature of the needs of the child. Okay, it's all individualized. But by and large, the transition goals, the transition services should be geared toward that purpose. And that is, what is the child going to do? And what can they do? And what can we help them do to prepare for life after they leave public education? Now, what is the main goal and purpose of the IDEA? I mean, what's the entire reason it exists? 3 reasons, guys. It's continuing education, okay, independent living, and economic viability. Those 3 things. This is why we fund special education. And so absolutely, the school system, and many schools, they really don't do a good job in this area. And some schools do. They get linked in with Project Search. They'll have the functional academics component or the academic component, let's say for the beginning of the day, and then they release the children for supported employment in the afternoon hours. For Project Search, they move the classroom to the work location to where they do functional academics in the morning, let's say, and then release them for the supported employment at whatever their cooperating business is for Project Search. By and large, it's been hospitals. But it's one of those things to where your school system, if you don't have those things, they can do those things. They should do those things. And it's just the whole thing to where you might need to be the one to pave the way. Because maybe parents before you just didn't do it, or there were a few that did it, that the school was like, yeah, we'll do something for them because they advocated in such a way. But this particular parent that I saw ask this question, very capable to be able to do this. And so the whole thing is absolutely, it can be done, especially if the child is on some kind of differentiated diploma pathway. If they're on a regular credits-based diploma pathway, then at that point, yeah, that can still even be done. Because there's nothing written in there for an identified child that has an IEP to sit there and follow a traditional, even regular credits-based diploma path. You can sit there and cut that off to where you can string it out for a year or so. Because the school will sit there and say, well, they've got a full schedule and they've got to hit these number of credits before they can graduate. Well, so what? Let's say you want your child to reduce that workload. They're more than capable of achieving those grades, but at the same time, you'd like to slow the roll there, okay, and not just cram it in there to where it's a meaningful education pathway and trajectory. And let's say for the second half of the day, we're working on transition things, independent living, and economic viability, to where we're looking outside in the community for things for them to do in a supported capacity or independently. It all would depend. But there is nothing in the IDEA that says that there should be some kind of lack of individuality. The entire point is to individualize these things and to think outside the box and look at the least restrictive environment, which is a continuum, guys. There's multiple points, thousands of possible points along that continuum. If the IEP team just chills and thinks about it and sits there and goes, okay, what do we have in our community? Because that's the entire role of an LEA. All right. An LEA is supposed to have knowledge of all the resources that are available in their community, and then also have the authority to commit those resources on behalf of your child. That's the definition of an LEA. So if they can't do those things, if they don't know what's available out there, not very good LEA. All right. So this is where you need to refocus, go back to the team, and then make those kind of decisions. And to have people obsessed with that they have to keep on a certain track or a pathway is not accurate. That's not legit. Okay. Your child and yourself as the parent have a lot of control over which diploma pathway your child should be striving for. It's not a school decision. They don't get to sit there and hamstring a child because they perceptively don't think they can get a diploma. Okay. We got to stay within the realm of reason, though. But at the same time, it is so heinously wrong for the school to sit there and pigeonhole a child and say, we don't think you can do it. But yet, let's say you're impacted environmentally and with your neighborhood or whatever. And let's say you don't have a disability, but you're struggling. Do you think they care if they just pass you along? And we've seen that happen all the time. How many schools are passing kids and giving them diplomas that can hardly read? But yet they don't have a disability, so therefore they can't get an IEP. They're just struggling due to, let's say, family situation or environment. So do you see where it's not necessarily, it's sort of discriminatory what they're doing out there, but then to sit there and pigeonhole your child and say, well, we can't work toward that diploma. You can work toward that diploma. D is passing. All right. And it's just one of those things to where sometimes you just need to cut down the workload. You have until 21 to get that regular diploma. Within reason, guys, you got to be reasonable about what our kids are capable of. My daughter would never, we would never put that kind of expectation on her because that isn't what is important for us. Her educational performance areas and where the priorities are for the remainder of her life is different. And we are quite cognizant of that. So I don't want anybody to sit there and think that I'm, somehow encouraging something outside of what is reasonable, because that is a legal standard. It must be reasonable. Everything must be reasonable. That is the legal standard. Okay. But absolutely, the world is your oyster, so to speak, when it comes to trying to structure what transition services look like and have them be tangible and meaningful.